So obviously, after Terrence Crawford has beaten Errol Spence so decisively, everyone has got him as their number one pound for pound fighter in the world, and rightly so. I've got him as my number one pound for pound fighter in the world, even above Inui, even though Inui gave such a great performance against Fulton. But there's one thing that's not being acknowledged. The fact is, yeah, not only did Terrence Crawford beat like Errol Spence to become the undisputed champion, he had to beat the politics that was actually in the game to get to that position. Now, there's a lot of things that have happened since everybody wanted this fight in 2018 to the fight actually happening in 2023. So that's a span of 5 years. And in them 5 years, I'm just going to be honest, the PBC pumped so much propaganda. Um, they pumped so much propaganda about Terrence Crawford. Like, not only that, not only did he have to deal with like the PBC nonsense about him crossing the street and having to actually sign a promotional deal with them to make the fight happen and all of this other nonsense, right? Not only did he have to deal with that propaganda, he also had to deal with the fact that his own promoter, Bob Arum, didn't want anything to do with him. Like, don't get it twisted. Bob Arum signed him, and I think he's been around boxing long enough to know that he had a very special talent in Terrence Crawford. But at the same time, he never saw Terrence Crawford as a viable commercial megastar, and to some extent, he's not. I mean, Terrence Crawford is never going to be as marketable as a Floyd Mayweather. He's never going to be as marketable as a Oscar De La Hoya. I think the thing about Terrence Crawford is he's almost like a silent assassin. He just goes in there, does his job, and leaves. He's not into all the theatrics, and that's one of the reasons why the Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence was, even though it was a big fight for hardcore boxing fans, for the average fans, they were interested in it to some extent, but it didn't have the same buzz that super fights have had previously. For example, Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns, or Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather. Them aforementioned fights, they had more charismatic combatants in them. They had fans of the sport that were so into fighting that they had very charismatic fight fans following it. For that reason, that's the reason why I believe like the sport was a lot bigger back in the day. A lot of you got a lot of great fighters out there like Terrence Crawford and Inui, but they don't have that much charisma compared to their other counterparts. I mean, who's more charismatic, Manny Pacquiao or Inui? It's obviously Manny Pacquiao. He does so many things outside of the ring, like he's a movie star, he's a singer, he plays basketball, he does a lot of charitable efforts. Inui's an amazing fighter, but in terms of charisma, he doesn't have that pizzazz to him. And it's the same with Crawford. I mean, who's more interesting, Crawford or Floyd Mayweather? Obviously, Floyd Mayweather is. That doesn't mean that I like him as a person, not at all. But in terms of who's more interesting, who catches your more attention more, is obviously Floyd Mayweather in terms of everything he does outside of the ring. So that being said, Terrence Crawford had to deal with a hell of a lot of politics to get this fight made, and then eventually it happened. It happened, thankfully, when both of them were undefeated. Not one of them took a loss, and there was a lot of hype going into the fight. And obviously, he came out with Eminem, and it was awesome. And then he absolutely dominated and destroyed Errol Spence. But one thing that cannot be overstated enough was the politics that he had to deal with. First, he had a difficult promotional situation with Bob Arum. Second of all, you had the PBC coming out with all their propaganda, telling him to cross the street to make the fight happen, and trying to wait until he aged or took a loss before they fought him. I remember one time there was a PBC show, and they mentioned all the top welterweights in the world, and guess whose name got left out of that list, even though he was champion at the time? Terrence Crawford. They literally listed every champion. They listed, I think, Sean Porter. They listed, obviously, listed Errol Spence. They mentioned Keith Thurman. I think they mentioned one other fighter. But the fighter that did not get mentioned, who was a WBO champion at the time, was Crawford. So I think not only did Crawford beat Errol Spence that night, he beat the boxing politics that tried stopping him from reaching the position he's at right now. So I think a lot of credit goes to Terrence Crawford for not giving up, because a lot of fighters under that level of scrutiny would have given up and said, the hell with this, I'm not going to get the fight that I want. And so I think he deserves a lot of credit. But tell me what you think below. What do you think about Crawford? Do you think he had to deal with a lot outside of the rings in terms of the politics? Like, he had to cross the road. He had a difficult promotional situation with Bob Arum, who didn't want to promote him. And he couldn't make the fight happen with Errol Spence. And I remember when he was up on stage, Terrence Crawford said it to his face. He said, "You can't make the Errol Spence fight for me, so I've got no use for you." He didn't say it exactly like that, but he said it in them types of ways. So yeah, that's just my opinion. Tell me your opinion about what I've said. Is everything I'm saying got some truth to it, or do you think there's a few lies here and there? I think he's had to deal with a lot of politics in the sport and corruption and a lot of promoters that didn't want to work with him, from Bob Arum, obviously Al Heyman telling him to cross the street to make the fight happen. All of this stuff that's happened in the sport. And thankfully, the fight happened, and he managed to prove that he's the best fighter in the world. But tell me what you think below. What do you think about this? Do you like what I'm saying, or do you think what I'm saying is not true? Tell me what you think, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace.